But I want to welcome everybody. Hey, Bunker Labs. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Liz Marion, the Digital Community Manager. And I am here to introduce our town hall that is powered by MetLife. And I'm joined by Bunker Labs founder, Todd Connor, who's going to lead our conversation today. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Liz. Thanks so much for organizing us, as always. Appreciate you. And welcome, everybody, Bunker Labs community. Excited to introduce and welcome Shawn Olds to today's town hall. And Shawn, we're gonna have a conversation about AI, something that I know, I think enough language to sort of fake it at a cocktail party, but not much more than that. So I'm eager to dive in and sort of learn from you what's taking place in the industry. So Shawn is a military veteran and entrepreneur. Shawn, if you can, would you mind just introducing yourself to the Bunker Labs community?
Sure, Todd. Thank you so much for having me. Liz, great to join you today. I appreciate you guys having me on. Brief background, I was a computer science major in college, went to West Point, got out, went into the Army. Unfortunately, I couldn't fall out of airplanes properly, so the Army kicked me out, and I ended up in the startup world. Went in the late 90s in the wonderful .com era. And for pretty much the past 20 some odd years have been tied to startups with a brief exception after September 11th. I got recruited back into government service and did counterterrorism work at the State Department in Southwest Asia and Africa. But other than that, I've been doing startups both domestically and internationally. And 4 years ago, moved back from Abu Dhabi to co-found boodleAI, which is a predictive analytics platform that helps nonprofits and commercial entities find their best donors or customers.
So interesting. I have questions about the last 20 years and what you've observed in the startup space, but let's maybe actually go in reverse order and start with boodleAI. How do you come to build a company that's doing predictive analytics as a business, right? For customer discovery or donor discovery? How'd you even come to this idea?
Well, you start with a great co-founder who comes up with the idea and makes you realize it's been a problem of yours that you haven't fixed. So in addition to everything I've done professionally, literally the day I graduated.
Let's maybe actually go in reverse order and start with boodleAI. How do you come to build a company that's doing predictive analytics?
How do you still there?
Yeah. I'm getting some feedback, Liz and Jada. Sorry if that's.
Yeah, I am as well. Give us 1 second.
It's gone.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay. We were getting a double Todd. We were getting two Todds. I think we're fixed now.
Right after graduating college, I went into doing nonprofit board work. And for 25 years now, I've always served on some sort of nonprofit board. It started in the youth education space, then went with several veteran service organizations. And the only aspect of that I didn't enjoy was fundraising. And it's not asking for money. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I have to ask for money for a living. It's what I do. But it was just how ineffective and inefficient that fundraising was. Because I was kind of myopically focused on my professional career, I never really sought to fix that. I just kind of endured the pain you have to go through as a board member. Fortunately, my co-founder didn't want to endure that and pitched me on the idea of bringing technology that is very commercially available, i.e. machine learning and AI, and leveraging it to help the nonprofit community. And that happened a little over 4 years ago. And we started to assemble a team. While I was a computer science major in school, the languages that I programmed in back then, they now teach in the history of computers classes. So I went out and found a very competent team, and they have built this platform, and we continue to evolve it every day.
That's awesome. I'm going to ask some dumb questions because those are the only ones I have. What is predictive analytics? What does that mean? We hear that term, but talk us through the machinations of this.
Yeah, no, it's predictive analytics at its core is taking past results and trying to make future predictions. So in our case, what we do is say we're working with a university. We can take a university's major gift donors. We use those donors, we enrich them with data we have access to, as well as the first party data that the university has. And we use an algorithm to train a machine learning model. And that model then helps the organization understand what its major gift donors look like. And now they can take a prospect list, whether that's current donors, whether that's people on an email distribution list, whether that's a direct mail list they're about to send out to, and they can now feed that prospect list into that model to determine who in that prospect list is most likely to look like their current major gift donors. And there's a variety of other types of donors. Universities always love to do monthly recurring donors too. But you can start to go down if an organization can start to segment the types of donors they like. You take the past successful donors and use that to predict who your future donors are going to be.
Interesting. What are the kinds of inputs that you would gather for something like that, right? So I guess the old model is sort of just a CRM, right? Where it's like everyone kind of gets a similar email and we're, hey, it's, we're appealing to alumni to donate back to university. But what are the kinds of inputs that make this sort of differentiated in a sense?
No, and Todd, I hate when people say that's a great question, but it is because it's the founding of how we built the company. We knew in the nonprofit space that nonprofits have all sorts of disparate data and sometimes very messy or incomplete data. And so we knew we'd be fighting a constant battle if we were trying to build our models off of the data that was given to us. And so what we decided to do was assume that most customers would have almost no data, that what they would have would be a name and an email address or a name and an address. And so we start with that with all of our customers. We've built a system that allows us to do what we call identity resolution. So I can verify that the Todd Connor that is in the donor database is the Todd Connor that lives in, you're in Chicago, right?
Right, yeah.
That's right. So lives in Chicago, and not the Todd Connor that lives in, say, Boise, Idaho. And then what I can do is I map Todd out to 3 third-party databases we have access to of 240 million adult Americans. And it allows me to bring back over 500 different data points about Todd. So where he's lived for the past 10 years, where he's worked for the past 10 years, voting records, credit card transaction data, who he's donated to politically and philanthropically, all things that are publicly available data, but things that define who you are and will help define your fit and affinity towards your cause. And so we bring all of that in for prospects, for actual donors, and use that enriched data set to train the algorithm.
Interesting. So you might say something to me as I'm just giving a scenario here, but as a alumni of Northwestern University, you might say, hey, Todd, Northwestern here. We know that you've recently donated to, Sierra Club. And let's talk, and we want to share with you Northwestern's environmental initiative. And would you be willing to support that or something? Is that more specific than you would be, or?
No. If you're in a prospect list, so let's say you're in a prospect list and Northwestern's trying to fundraise and they find out that people who have donated to the Sierra Club before are amongst most of their donors. Well, now if we know that you've donated to the Sierra Club, then what it does is it allows the algorithm to uptick you. It doesn't make you definitive you're going to donate, but it's one of 550 data points we use to increase the likelihood that you may be a potential donor.
Very interesting. Very interesting. How's the business going so far? What are you seeing in terms of results of using this kind of predictive technology in donor engagement?
We've had some wonderful results. And it's interesting because we've gotten to the point, and every entrepreneur loves this, we've gotten to the point now where our clients are teaching us how to use our platform. So we envisioned one thing, but now that the rubber's meeting the road and we're talking to our clients, they've come up with new and interesting ways. So for example, we plan on just using this for fundraising. We've had a client who approached us and said, actually, I just want to use this for engagement initially, because I've got a really high drop-off rate when I send out my newsletter. And what they realized is they were doing this quarterly newsletter, but it was a foundation that spoke to 4 distinct areas. And what they were doing is when they would send a quarterly newsletter focused on one of them, people that were more interested in the other 3 were unsubscribing. So what they did was they built 4 models, 1 for each area, and now they only send the newsletter to people that pertain to that area. They said in the first month, their unsubscribe rate dropped to almost 0, their open rate increased by 80%, their click-through rate increased by over 30%. So, and that's not fundraising at all. We would have never thought of pitching that as an idea, but now we see the benefit of it.
Yeah.
On the fundraising side, people are finding neat things. We had a foundation, very established foundation, decided to use our system to look at their email newsletter list. A list they'd never solicited from before because they didn't want people to leave them. They liked getting their information out. But we convinced them to look, and they picked the top 5% of that list, and in there found a $10,000 donor. So, and there's a myriad of examples like that of things we've been able to do with organizations.
Wow. So this is very interesting. Can you give us a perspective on what's happening with AI generally? I mean, like for somebody that has maybe heard the term AI, but that's about it. What can you tell us about artificial intelligence? And in some ways, it sounds like a boogeyman, but like, what is it? And here's one application which seems actually really kind of instructive and helpful. But give us a perspective on what's happening with AI generally.
Sure. So I love it because you always say, I've heard about it and I can spell it. So you've got two things well on your way. Look, AI is fascinating. I mean, just looking at it from taking a step back, there was a report about 2 years ago, it was a McKinsey report that posited that AI between now and 2030 would probably add about 16% to the current global output. That translates to almost $13 trillion in output to the global economy, which is unprecedented because if you look through history, you look at the steam engine in the 1800s added about 0.3%. You look at robots in the 90s, which added about 0.4%. And you look at IT in aggregate in the 2000s, added about 0.6%. You're talking about AI adding 1.2%. So the power of AI and what it can do is just phenomenal. The other neat thing to look at is pre-COVID, productivity in this country was actually lower than it was in the 60s. Since 1970, productivity has been at about, I think the report I last saw was at about 1.4. And there's been a lot of talk about that AI would actually replace humans and what impact would that actually have on productivity.
Yeah, right.
Where we see and how we built our system is actually focused on where most people who know AI will argue AI is at its most powerful, is the human AI relationship. So AI does a lot of that heavy lifting that a human could do, but it might take them weeks or months or years to do. And AI can do it in minutes or hours or days. And then relying on the human, though, to do many of those things that a machine just right now can't do. For instance, in the donative world, I can feed you your top prospects, but you may know that the number one prospect just had a death in the family. Well, now's not the time to go ask them for money. But you can log in the back of your mind that, okay, this is a person we'll go talk to later on, but now's the time to send flowers. Now's the time to send condolences. The machine's not going to make that differentiation. The machine's going to send a note out if left unsupervised and just ask for a donation.
Yeah. Well, how does 1.2% in product or in output gains? I guess that was the metric, right? Output. Where does that get realized? Like, are there particular domains or verticals or industries where AI, you're seeing it really kind of disrupt the way that things are done beyond the donative space?
I think that's why it's so big as compared to other years, is AI is being used across the board. I mean, one of the places people thought AI would be used the last is the nonprofit space. It's always kind of the nonprofits are always the laggard in technology. And the real reality is AI is being used in fascinating ways in the nonprofit space, not just fundraising. We, of course, at Boodle, we focus on using AI for fundraising, but there's a lot of programmatic ways that nonprofits are able to use AI and machine learning that is actually helping them either save money or do things more efficiently. And at the end of the day, that's going to help with fundraising too, because if donors see an organization using their money efficiently, they're more likely to give more money.
Yeah.
But as far as are there specific industries, there are not. It's being used across the board in the insurance space, in consumer goods, in nonprofits, in education. It's being used across the board. And I think that's where you're going to see the big uptick in productivity.
Right. Just that it's not just like a new tool. It's a whole new sort of way of understanding data and applying data. Let me ask you a question. One technical question, which is what's the difference between AI and machine learning? Because I think that's another term that people are hearing. And I feel like sometimes using interchangeably, but are they the same? Are they different? And then I want to ask a second question, which is how is COVID sort of impacting the application of AI? Is it accelerating it, decelerating it? And then maybe just what's it doing for your business in this moment as well?
Sure. So 3 questions there, starting at the top. AI is the umbrella of artificial intelligence. Within AI, there are different types. So machine learning is a segment or subset of AI. You'll hear other terms like natural language processing, which is another subset. There are a variety of different disciplines within the artificial intelligence realm. We happen to focus on machine learning. That's what we focus on. Siri, which recognizes how, when you talk to it, or your Alexa, that's focusing on the natural language processing end of AI. As far as how COVID has impacted AI, I mean, I think AI is actually being used in a lot of ways. A lot of the vaccine trials that are going on, they're leveraging AI instead of having to go through, and this was happening before COVID, but a lot of these companies that try and create drugs, which would normally have to go through long cycles, part of what they're able to do is speed that up by going through simulations using AI. One of our advisors is is a CEO of a company in Toronto that is using deep learning and neural networks, subsets of AI, to find oncology cures. So there are fascinating ways that AI are being used, and now that COVID has hit, there are a lot of people leveraging facets of AI to try and see if we can find a way to beat it. And then your third question was how it's impacted us.
Yeah, how it's impacted COVID, because you think predictive analytics. I think the biggest predictive analytics question that everyone has is like, what is going to be sort of the cumulative effect of COVID? And questions like, when will there be a cure? When will we sort of be able to open up safely? I mean, we're seeing all these sort of forecast models emerge. I'm just curious if AI is playing a role in that conversation, and then we can talk more about kind of what it means for Boodle in this moment as well.
Yeah. So I wish, if someone had an AI that could determine when we're going to beat it and what it's going to look like afterwards, they'd be very rich people.
Yeah.
I think the way AI is helping us determine that is just by, being used in the various disciplines and fields that are trying to find ways to beat it. My understanding, I haven't seen the actual studies, but I've been told that it's being used just in the tracking and the forecasting. Which makes a lot of sense. You can run a variety of different forecast models very quickly based on how previous spreads have been done. So looking at how the Spanish flu spread, looking at how other pandemics have spread, you can train a machine and then filter in the information that you have now and start to build some pretty reliable forecast on what might happen. And the nice thing is you can do that with a variety of different scenarios. What if we open? What if we lock down? What if we do a partial open? And start to look at all of those scenarios very quickly, much faster than any team of humans would be able to do it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then let's talk about Boodle. How's it going for you guys? I would imagine that a number of organizations that are used to cultivating donors through, in-person cocktail events and meet and greets and things like that might be looking for kind of alternative ways of engaging their donor audience or speaking to them in this moment. What's it mean for your business to be operating in this moment?
Yeah, I'd like to say that my co-founder and I were smart enough 4 years ago to plan for a pandemic. We didn't. We were very grateful, though, that the tool we built is really well suited for a pandemic. So if you look at nonprofits, they've lost access to most of their traditional forms of fundraising. They can't do galas right now. They can't do their races. They can't do in-person meetings. And so we've been very fortunate. We have a tool that in the it's been almost 5 months since lockdown, that organizations that are, their development teams are sitting in their living rooms and kitchens right now, are able to onboard in our system in less than 3 hours, and then they're able to action their results from their living room or kitchen. So we're providing a tool that organizations are looking for as new ways of fundraising. So we feel very fortunate in that regard. It also accelerated, we didn't expect this, but it accelerated our move into the commercial space. So we actually had board members of nonprofits who are working in commercial companies who understood what we were doing and very quickly said, well, wait a minute, if you can find me the best donors, why couldn't you find my company our best customers? And we've been able to do the same thing. And so the beginning of this year, we actually started working in the commercial space as well.
I have to ask this because I think a lot of people that aren't technologists maybe have this anxiety, but are there things with AI that make you nervous? Are there, there's conversation about sort of the ethics of, machine learning and, when are the robots going to come take us over and all of those things. But what's your view on this? I mean, what are the ethical responsibilities or maybe some of the dangers that you're potentially seeing with some of these sophisticated tools?
Absolutely. One of the greatest books I've read recently that really makes you think is, if you haven't read it yet, is Army of None. It's a play on the Army of One, but it's written about the ethics of AI and DoD and how we use it there. And I thought it was a really well-written book because it doesn't give you an answer. It looks at a variety of different scenarios and leaves it to you to kind of decide what you think is best. But found it to be a fascinating book. We worry every day internally about two big things. One is data security. So as I mentioned, we have access to the data on 240 million adult Americans. And so there's always that, how do we make sure not just do we not get it stolen, but how do we do the right things with that data? So we're not a data broker. I don't sell that data to any of our clients. None of our clients get access to that data for their own personal purposes. They get access to that data to run analytics on our platform. But we're very careful about making sure that they can't walk away with it and do something malfeasant with it in any way whatsoever. The second big thing we're always concerned about is kind of the ethics in AI and what it's used for. Ethics from are we doing the right things with it to how much bias is in it, and really looking, it's amazing. It's easy to say, well, of course this is bias, and look at certain sets of data and say that they're going to be biased, but you start to realize as you dig down, there are biases built into some of the data you take in. And so really kind of sifting through that and always doing the homework to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and are there any inherent biases that we need to root out and make sure aren't there. So there is a decades of discussion, years if not decades of discussions that will need to be had around ethics, around bias, and around security. And there'll be ongoing discussions.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And we're seeing this play out, right, with Facebook, and sort of how do you not create environments that are sort of self-feeding, right? That, how do we sort of still have sort of like the community space where there's a shared conversation that's taking place? It's very interesting. So Shawn, you've been an entrepreneur for sort of 20 years in and out. What this is not, sort of onto you personally as a leader and as an entrepreneur, what's different this time around for you? Are there mistakes that you've made in the past that you're actually trying to avoid? What's the wisdom that you're bringing into this particular experience?
So the biggest difference is it's a lot harder to do when you have a family. I found that out. My previous endeavors, I was younger and single. This one is the first one that gave me gray hair. So, look, as with anything in life, you learn things. I definitely have approached this a lot differently. Everything from how we've grown the team. We just added today our 19th team member. I've worked with other organizations earlier where we grew a lot faster, and that was a mistake. You grow too quickly, and you've got resources you don't necessarily need, and you're spending way too much money. So we've been very lean in our approach. It puts a lot of work on the early people in the team, but it makes us more effective and more efficient. We've also learned, I learned from previous organizations that you've constantly got to iterate. I went out early on, probably some of our first companies, and you just knew what the consumer needed because it's what you needed. And that's great. I can find 10 of my family and friends to all tell me that you got a great idea, but you really got to get out and meet people who don't know you, because people who don't know you will give you really valid feedback, and that's where you're going to learn what you need. And that's how we evolve the company. We have a customer success team that is just obsessed with understanding what our customer wants and asking our customer through surveys, through in-person interviews, through casual conversations on what more they need out of the platform and what about the platform they're not happy with. And that's the only way we can continually innovate and iterate and grow.
I think that point is fascinating, because I think this is sort of the dynamic, arguably sort of conflicting dynamic that entrepreneurs have to hold at the same time. One is to be sort of a relentless advocate, salesperson for the business that you're launching and growing, right? Like the consummate pitch person. And that's part of the skill set, but also this real obsession with raw feedback and hearing that and taking that seriously. How do you juggle both those things? I think it's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. How do you both be the salesperson and the advocate for the business, but also sort of take and hear and implement the feedback?
Well, I mean, at your core, it's one of the things, everybody learned when they're in the military for sure. And everybody typically learns through life is you just got to be honest. Honesty with the people you're talking to, whether you're customers or whether you're potential customers, goes a long way. And, if I get really good feedback from 6 different customers that what I was out pitching is the greatest thing since sliced bread yesterday actually isn't that good, then I've got to evolve my pitch very quickly. And many times if I don't know what that next pitch is, I'm just honest and talk about, hey, we've got some really good feedback from 6 other customers that what we were doing needs to be evolved. And here's what we're thinking about. What do you think? And then more than anything, that's a great way to really get a potential customer converted to a customer. Ask them what they think. Get their feedback, because now they're bought in. Now they feel like they're part of the process and they're not going to walk away from that.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. So you've spent and the questions, if folks want to ask questions, the chat's open, so feel free to put those there. But you spent the last several years sort of really becoming expert at AI and sort of the dimensions around this. And I can only imagine the number of conversations you've had and what your learning curves look like, not to mention the field itself is sort of evolving and becoming more sophisticated. Knowing what you know now, and let's just assume boodleAI is a massive success, which I think it's on its way to being. What else would you be looking at? What other applications are you sort of curious about if you were going to build another business in the AI space beyond what you've already done? What would be of interest to you in this moment?
So I would
probably thoughts you've had.
Yep. Look, my big hope is that I'm probably cresting close to the first half of my life, that the latter half of my life will be, more focused on the philanthropic community and in what I'm able to give back into the community. And so I would love to start to figure out what are those AI applications that don't focus on fundraising, but focus on the programmatic needs of the nonprofit community, of governments, that just at the end of the day make them more effective and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that is constantly evolving. I haven't spent a lot of time narrowing in on this is the one, because if I had one today, 5, 6, 10 years from now, when we've moved on from Boodle, it will have already evolved. So I look forward to studying more deeply in the space and trying to determine what that one is. Mm-hmm. But that's the neat thing, is it is constantly evolving. As I said at the outset, I don't think most people would have thought AI would have been in philanthropy. And now you see it in fundraising, you see it in programmatic uses. I'll share a really quick, neat story I heard. AI is having impacts in ways that is not even true AI yet. So, the core of AI is data. You need data to train, to feed into your algorithms, to train your models. And there was a wonderful story of an organization that was trying to understand epilepsy in children. And one of the ways they do that is by monitoring children who have seizures. And so they had built these smartwatches to put on kids. And they had planned a 2-year study of just collecting data. So no AI really involved. It was just the collection of data by having these kids wear it. And a mother said she put her 6-year-old daughter down to bed, kissed her goodnight, went into her bedroom, took a shower. And part of it is the watch that the little girl wore had an alarm on it that went to the mother's phone. And the mother said she had just gotten in the shower when the alarm went off. And so she immediately got out of the shower, threw a towel on, walked into the room, and her daughter was face down on the bed, not breathing. And she turned her over, and the act of turning her over got her to breathe again, and she was breathing. And the mother said that but for that alarm, she would have been in the shower for at least 10, 15 minutes. And then would have gotten out, gone through her normal routine, and it probably would have been half an hour before she'd gone in to check on her daughter. And half an hour without breathing, of course, her daughter would have been dead. And so, there's a neat way that AI is impacting life today. That's not even really AI. It's the predecessor of AI, which is the collection of data.
Wow. We have some interesting questions coming in. Are there industries that you think are most ripe to be disrupted by AI?
Disruptive.
You see this touching just about every industry in some level, but are there industries in particular that you think are are waiting to be disrupted?
Absolutely. We're already seeing it. I mean, vehicles, we will be moving to self-driving vehicles. You talked about the baby you have, and I have a 22-month-old son. If by the time he is our age, he's not in a complete self-driving society, he's probably not far away. And that's AI. That's continuously learning, AI and machine learning, impacting that. Energy is another space that will be massively disrupted. Philanthropy is going to be completely disrupted with AI. I think the bigger question, I don't know how to answer it right now, is are there industries that won't be impacted by AI? And that's something I think is a smaller list than those that will be impacted by it.
Amazing. How does it, and this is another question from the audience, how does someone know whether or not, if you're a business or an entity or an organization, how do you know whether or not you're ready to sort of move forward implementing AI? What's the sort of threshold level of capacity or sophistication you have to have as an organization to say, okay, we can make use of this tool? I have to imagine that their customer has to be at a point of readiness for using tools like this, but what's your perspective?
So 2-part answer. One, you definitely have to have the mindset that you want to do it, right? You've got to be ready. And in the technology world, there are early adopters, and at the opposite end of the spectrum, there are laggards, and then there's everybody in between. Early adopters are the people who are the first one in line to get the new iPhone or the new iWatch or whatever it may be. Once you've got the mindset that I want to do it, as far as experience that you need to have, it really does depend on the industry and the tools that are available. One of the reasons we built Boodle was to democratize AI for the philanthropic community, both in terms of pricing and usage. So when we started with our development team 4 years ago, I gave them the mandate that you have to assume that our end user can watch Netflix, Google, and order on Amazon. It can't be any more complicated than that. And we've done that. So when working with the nonprofit community, if they're ready to get in and use AI at its very basic level, we can provide them a tool where they could have a degree in art history or underwater basket weaving. Doesn't matter. They don't need to have a science degree, and they can still use the tool very efficiently and effectively.
Awesome. And since I know we're almost at time, I'll maybe make this the last question again from the audience, but are there recommendations of classes or resources to learn more about AI? What are the things that you're watching, reading? How does somebody go about getting smart on this topic and continuing to stay smart?
I would look at the online course set. I mean, I will tell you, my co-founder, who you know, was one of those guys when we started who could just barely spell AI. He would not necessarily be able to talk to you a lot about AI. He then took, 2 Christmases ago, basically took from Thanksgiving to New Year's and took 3 online courses. And he's probably one of the more fluent people in our company in AI today. The online course structure, and I think it cost him less than a couple $100. So he took a couple free ones and then did a couple of advanced ones. But the online coursework that is out there can get you a great foundation. And then after that, it's kind of natural curiosity that's going to take you to the next steps.
So someone's asking if we can share those courses. Yeah, we'll track those down from France, and we'll see if we can actually share those with the communities. That would be interesting to know. Okay, one more question. I lied, but this will be the last one. So Shawn, you've been out there raising money. A lot of folks are trying to raise money from the venture capital community, angel investor communities. Can you talk about what that's been like and maybe what's changed? So, give us a perspective for whatever's public information for Boodle and its fundraising journey, and what's your advice for other folks out there looking to raise money for their businesses?
One simple word: painful.
Yeah.
Now, it was extra painful for us because when we started, we were only focusing on the philanthropic community. And investors, venture capitalists, have this mindset that there's no way you can make money in the philanthropic community. The reality is, philanthropic community raises $465 billion a year. It's a huge market space. And so it was very hard in our initial days to raise money. Then throw on top of that COVID-19, and that really dried up the well. We actually were about to close a round of fundraising at the end of February. The economy fell out, and we didn't. And there was a good 90 days where no one was talking. At the beginning of June, you started to see some deals start to pick up. There was a report last week out of Crunchbase, though, that Q2 deals dropped by over 10%. I think it was something on the order of about 555 early stage to A round deals that got done in the venture capital community in North America, so US and Canada. Which in the grand scheme of things, given the number of companies looking for money, it's actually a very, very small number. And I suspect Q3 will probably be close to the same. So right now is the time, as companies are raising, if they're at that right juncture where they don't need institutional money, looking to friends and family, looking to high net worth individuals, looking to family offices. So family offices went really dark right afterwards because a lot of them had commitments and they had to kind of see where they were going. They are now getting a better handle of what their cash flow commitments are, and they're now looking for opportunities. And then the angel community. There's always the angel community out there. But, the big thing I would say to any company right now, and we're following this, is conserve the cash you have, operate as leanly as possible, and just constantly be out there. I mean, there's not a week, if let alone not a day goes by that I'm not talking to someone that's a potential investor.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've watched you guys in the journey, and you've it's just been impressive to watch, to have grown to the 19-person team that you are today and the success. So Shawn Olds, co-founder, chief executive officer of boodleAI. Thank you, Shawn, for being with us. And if folks want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
My email is right there, Shawn@boodleAI. Phone number is right there. Feel free to email or call me.
Perfect. All right.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to join you today. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you both.
Thank you, Liz.
And I'll remind everybody that if you have any questions for Bunker Labs or if we can help support you and move your business forward, please email townhall@bunkerlabs.org. Thank you so much. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Shawn.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.